called as Prolog. Okay, the languages per se are not that important. It is important that what is important is you understand these styles of programming. Okay, so functional programming is what we will start with. Okay, so today we will explain few things about functional programming. But before we get into that, let me discuss some logistical matters related to the course. Okay, so we will meet on every Wednesday at 9 to 10. Okay, so I will be available from 9 to 10. So either there will be a lecture where I'll explain some concepts, or you can ask questions, clear doubts, and so on. So there will be a tutorial session. Okay, and the lab will basically be from 8 to 12. So the lab runs from 8 to 12.
Excuse me, sir?
Yes.
Sir, we have a course from 9 to 10 on every Wednesday.
No, so this is so this lab. Okay, so this was scheduled in B1 slot.
So actually, during the registration, we were not given any like restrictions while.
Okay, so let me just do a rain check. So what does the course timetable? You've got a timetable for the semester?
We have a PDF in which the slots are mentioned. The slot for the lab was not mentioned.
Huh? Just one second.
Slot for
look at the list that I have. Oh, okay. So the slot for this course is from 8 to 9. Okay, and second. ML3 and B1, that's the slot. Right? Did you get the same thing?
So actually, in the PDF which was circulated in our class, the slots for the labs were not given. Like during the registration.
So the slot that I have got says the class slot is in ML3 and B1. Okay. So ML3 would mean this is Wednesday, right?
Morning.
From morning 8 to 12 is reserved for this lab. Okay, so which is the other course that for which there is a clash?
It's topics and networks. It's a theory course. It has a class from 9 to 10 a.m. on Wednesday.
Okay, 1 second. Topics in network is a departmental elective, right?
Yeah, it's elective.
Okay, its slot is A slot.
Yes, sir. It has a slot. I guess from 9 to 10 a.m. It has classes on Monday through Wednesday.
Yeah, so but the lab is M3 lab is at this time. There is this cannot be rescheduled because there is no other option at which the lab can be conducted. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the lab will be conducted at that time, 8 to 12. It's a 4. So the 4 hours will be basically on Wednesday from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
And from 9 to 10, there will be a session where so the tutorial slot will be from 9 to 10. Okay. Any questions there? So if some other slot is clashing with it, you will have to ask the instructors of the other course to reschedule it, because lab slot I cannot really change. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, sir.
Yes.
So what happens in the lab sessions would be there will be a 1 hour tutorial or a 1 hour lecture. Okay. So some weeks maybe you will have a tutorial, some week you will have a lecture, and so on. Okay. And I will be circulating problem sheets. You will have to do exercise to come to the lab. You have to prepare it, and the TAs will basically be conducting short vivas for you, okay, in every lab session. Okay. So each lab session basically will carry marks, 100 marks per session. There will be, I mean, if we exclude today, there will be 13 sessions. Okay, so that will count for 13 to 100 marks. Okay, so think of each lab as having 100 marks, and that will be for the programs that you have written, and the okay. And finally, there will be a viva, a single end sem viva, for which that will carry 25% of the total weightage. Okay, so 75 weightage will be for the lab sessions, and 100 for the 25 for the end sem viva. Okay, so is this clear? So you are expected to be present from 8 to 12 on all Wednesdays. Okay, because the TAs will have to evaluate multiple students. Okay, so you will have to be, I mean, you will have to be available during that slot, so that you can be evaluated when a turn comes. Any questions?
Sir, will the lab evaluations only be conducted on Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so no rescheduling of that will be possible, because there are lots of students, and the TAs are also with their own works. Okay, so this is a time where it is earmarked for CS 331, and we will do it only during. Okay. Okay, so now let's get to the subject matter. Straight away moving to functional programming. Okay, so I'll assume that there are no questions from your end. Okay, so let's get started with functional programming. Can somebody tell me what is a function? Rahul?
Yes, sir. Sir, function is it is a part of code that we can call from the main program that will perform specific actions and return some result.
Not the view of functions that we will take for this particular course. Mathematics. So what is the meaning of a function in mathematics? Can somebody give me a precise definition?
Function is anything that maps some input to an output.
It maps an input to output. What is input? In maths, are there inputs and
like
outputs?
A domain.
When you are
some
introduced, in your discrete math course, you would have learned what a function is, right? Aditya, do you remember what a function is from your discrete math course, or maybe from your high school? Aditya Sinha?
Sir, it's a function is a kind of relationship which maps elements from one set to another, like that kind of, which I learned in discrete.
So, what aspect is, let us say, functions in C program different from these?
Can you repeat the question, sir?
See, when you have some language like C or C++, there are functions there as well, right? Are those functions also the same as the functions in mathematics?
Sir, in mathematics and in C program, right? In mathematics, it provides a mapping. We can say in layman terms that it also happens in C program, but some of the functions, like some of the functions return some particular kind of output, but some functions don't return a particular kind of output in programs. Like if the type of the function is void, they just perform some actions. So I don't think that these are the same in mathematics and programs, but they more or less carry the same meaning.
Okay. So here, when in Haskell, when we say function, it supports functional programming paradigm. What we mean, the entire computation is basically done by means of function compositions. Okay, it's a loaded statement. You need to think about it to understand this fully. Okay. So let us contrast with C++ or C, where the style of programming is what is called as imperative programming. Okay, so what happens in C++? Okay, you have data. The data is basically residing in your memory, and you have certain operations. I don't want to use the term functions. I'll just say that there are certain operations which keeps on modifying this data. Okay, so you take an input data which is stored in the memory and keep on modifying this data till it gets into the form that you want. For example, if the data corresponds to a set of to a collection of integers, okay, a sorting program will basically modify this data so that after all the modifications are done, the data will now be the same data as the initial data, but in the sorted order. Is that clear? Is that so? That style of programming is called as imperative programming. Any questions? Nikhil? Ashish?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, is the imperative style of is the basic idea behind imperative style clear?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, I assume that most of your batchmates are also in the same situation. Okay, so when you think about, so you need to understand what is computation. Okay, program, and then we can talk about functional programming. Okay, so usual C program computation. When you write a program, what does it do? It transforms data. Is this clear? You have some data. The program is basically transforming that data into something else. Maybe it produces some display, some output on the screen and so on. But whatever is displayed on the screen must essentially be somewhere in the memory sometime before. Okay, so whatever data is there in the memory, that is being modified, right? That's basically imperative programming. You are asking the computer to modify. Okay, you're giving instructions. Change this memory location in this particular manner, change that memory location in another manner, and so on. So by repeatedly modifying the stored data, you basically change it into the form that you want.
Okay, sir, understood.
Okay, so that's the imperative style of programming. So any C program, you can essentially think about it that way, right? So now we are going to look at an entirely different way of programming, namely functional programming. Okay, Here, there is no memory. You can, in some sense, if you are looking at pure functional programming, okay, you don't have to worry about memory at all. Okay, in the sense, it is convenient to think that there are no memory at all. Okay, so let's understand how this thing works. Let us think about the function called sort. Okay, can you rephrase the sorting function as a mathematical function? So sorting does what? Aryan? What's the input to a sort function? Anirudh? See, the more you speak, the more you learn in this course. Yeah, so somebody had raised their hand. Yes, Hardik?
Basically, if a function sorts an input, maps that input to a permutation of itself in which all the elements are arranged in a particular order, maybe increasing, maybe decreasing.
Okay, so let's say when we say sort, we mean increasing. Okay, so here is a task. Okay, we want to view sort as a mathematical function. So that means it must have a domain and it must have a range, right?
Yes, sir.
Hardik, so what is a domain? So sort, I'm just going to think of it as a function.
So you mean domain in what?
Okay, so it will have a domain. Let me call the domain as D for the time being. And so it's a function from D to the range. Let me call it as script R for the time being. Okay, what is D?
So it's the power set of integers.
It is the power set of integers.
Like each set can be, and each set will be having all the permutations.
Okay, so so that is it's a reasonable answer. You are saying the D is taken to be the power set. Okay, so P of integers. Integers is Z. Okay, so all possible subsets of integers can be given as input.
Also the permutations of each and every set.
Huh?
Also the permutations, like we are interested in order.
Okay, so now you see that there is, I mean, you could say that sort takes just sets. Okay, or you could say that sort takes ordered sets. So they are different, right? Is the distinction clear? Okay, so
Yes,
different sort function will do different things. Okay, by different sort functions, I didn't mean, let's say heap sort and merge sort and so on. Okay, the algorithm, the transformation that is being brought out is not currently discussed. I mean, I'm just saying, what is a domain? Okay, the domains could be just sets. You're given a collection of numbers, you just need to sort it. That makes sense. One could also say that, look, I'm going to give you an ordered collection of elements. Okay, so the distinction is between these two entities. Okay, so let's say A is the set 1, 2, 3 and B is the tuple 1, 2, 3. Are they the same?
No, sir.
Yeah, because A doesn't have a first element, whereas B does have a first element and so on, right? And see, we don't really want to, at least when we are thinking about programs later on, we don't want to really think about power set of integers because infinite sets, you're not interested in sorting them, right? So we could say it's a subset of the power set of integers, but the subset consists of only those sets which are finite. Okay, infinite sets, we are not going to think about it. Okay, so the domain. So what exactly is the domain? So domain, let us say it is a collection of tuples. Okay, so that means they are ordered. They're already ordered. There's a first element, there's a second element, there's a third element, and so on. Okay, so one possible input could be 1, 3, 2, 7, 5. Another input could be 81, 35, -8, 27, 2. Okay, so you look at all such tuples, okay, of arbitrary length, okay, but finite. They cannot be infinite length, and that is your set D. Clear? Is this clear? Okay, so this might look like, I mean, we're nitpicking, but understanding this properly will help you. I mean, will make things simpler for you when you go into details of functional programming. Okay, so for sort, the first thing is, I mean, if you are thinking of sort as a function, okay, the domain D is basically the set of all finite ordered lists. Okay, is that clear? This is not the only choice, but this is what we will start with. Okay, so D is the set of all ordered tuples of finite length. Tuples of integers. Okay, let's say that the underlying domain is, I mean, the collection that you want to sort are all integers. Okay, and what is the range for sort? That's going to be a set. Can somebody describe that set? Ajay? Ajay? Yes, Parag?
So the set of all ordered tuples of finite length where the subsequent element is greater than or equal to the previous element.
Okay, so so all tuples which are in increasing order, right? That's your range, right? So it will contain.
Yes.
So the range. So the range will contain 1, 2, 3. Will it contain 1, 3, 2?
No, sir.
So this does not belong to R. Okay. So now we have identified the domain and range. Ashish, you want to say something?
So we can say non-decreasing permutation of input.
Yeah, so non-decreasing permutation of the, so that is, see, that is not a very correct answer, because see, when we say domain, that's a set, right?
Means yes. Yes.
When you say non-decreasing permutation of the input, that's no longer a set, right?
Yes.
You are thinking about how the particular input maps to the output.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you say sin x, what's the domain?
Uh,
Real.
Yes, real.
What's the range? Well, you can say reals, or let us say -1 to +1.
-1 to 1.
Okay, you don't say that, look, if the value is pi/2, it is 1 and so on, right? That is further details. The first thing when you want to describe a function is to identify the domain and then the range. Okay. And then for each element, you're going to put these arrows going from one side to other. Okay. That's basically the description of the function. Okay. Right now, all that we said is the range is consisting of tuples which are ordered in the increasing order. Right? So those alone will be the elements in the range. For example, 1, 2, 3 is going to be part of this range. 1, 2 is also going to be part of this range. Okay. Which are all the elements in the domain which will map to 1, 2? So in domain, there might be some element which will map to 1, 2, right?
All the
1,
permutations.
2 and 2.
Yeah, 1, 2, 2, 1 will all map to this. Okay. Is 1, 1 part of the range?
If we are not
Yes, sir.
connecting this, it can be.
So as per our definition, we are just looking at ordered lists. In ordered lists, elements can repeat. There's no issues, right? So 1, 1, I mean, the only element which would map to 1, 1 is basically 1, 1 itself, right? Okay. So when you think about any algorithm, the algorithm is basically taking an input. There's a domain and then there's a range. Okay. And when you say that the algorithm is correct, it means that the mappings that the problem designer had in mind is correctly computed by the algorithm. Okay, so here we just after spending about 15-20 minutes, all that we managed is for the sort function, we identified its domain and range. Okay, not the only possible such description, but something that is useful for us. That's all. Okay, we have said that we are interested in sorting just integers. Okay, and the domain happens to be the collection of all ordered tuples of finite length, and the range happens to be again, you could have taken the range as domain itself, but then the function is not going to be an onto function. Is that clear? Is there any problem in taking R the same as D? Parag?
There isn't any problem, but then as you said, it won't be onto, like there would be extra elements present.
Right? So when we want to describe functions, I mean, it's the same as what's the domain of sin x? Well, it depends on what you call as the domain. You could have taken -r to -infinity to +infinity, or some let's say pi to 2 pi, whatever you can fix. Okay, and the range also you can say it's -infinity to +infinity, but maybe the set of values which actually come up are between -1 and +1, right? So here also there is no, there's nothing sacrosanct about the choice of D and R. You could take R to be, let us say, D itself. Okay. Now we have identified domain and range, but now how do we describe these functions? Somebody said that, look, take an element of the domain, and what we want as it's the image of that element is basically the permutation of that of the elements in that tuple, which happens to be in the increasing order, right? That is clear. That is what we mean by sorting, right? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. So now let me give some other examples of functions. Okay, we will come back to sorting in a while. So if you think about, let us say, splitting a set of numbers into two parts. Okay, so this is a programming task that you might have done. Okay, you're given an array and you want to, let us say, I mean, you've given a number 5. Okay, so you want to produce 2 arrays, one consisting of the first 5 elements and the second consisting of the remaining elements. Okay, for such a, so think about such a function from a mathematical point of view. What will be the domain and what will be the range? Okay, so once again, the algorithmic problem that I have in mind is the following. I'm going to give you a list or an array. Okay, it's an ordered collection of elements, and I am going to give you an integer, a positive integer. Okay, so if the positive integer happens to be 5, say, okay, you need to produce 2 lists. The first list consists of elements from 0 to 5 or 1 to 5, and the second list is the remaining elements. Okay, so what would be the, domain and what would be the range? Okay, so let me, if you have split, and this is the name of the function. Okay, and if I take the tuple 3, 1, 2, okay, and I give the number 2 as the second parameter, what I should get will be equal to the value of this function evaluated at 3, 1, 2, and 2 will be, the first list will consist of just 3, and the second list will contain just 2. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3. This is a position, the first position, the second position, and the third position. Okay, so you're splitting at position 2. Okay, if you had, let us say, 3, 1, 2, 5, 7, and let us say 3, and if I had applied a split to it, what I will essentially get is 3, 1. Okay, because this is the third element, and the second part would be 5 and 7. Okay, so this is the return value. You can think of this is the value of the function at this particular point. Okay, for such a function, okay, I've described an algorithmic problem or a programming problem. What I want you to tell me is what is going to be the domain and range of this particular function. Anand?
Same as previous problem, sir. Means set of finite order tuples.
Is it? No. Okay, so let's just, to simplify things, I'm going to call the input as, so this is, what I'm writing as 312, I will call it as a list, and the set of all lists, I will denote it by capital L. Yes, Lakshmi?
Sir, domain will be set of pair of ordered tuple and an integer. Range will be set of pair of 2 ordered tuples.
Okay, so domain will be, can you describe it as a set in a more formal setting?
It is a set.
So L, we're going to introduce some notation. One second, we're going to introduce some notations. L means it's a collection of all lists. Okay, list is essentially a collection of, you can think of it as an array. It's a ordered collection of objects. Okay, so 312 in square brackets, that's a list. The collection of all lists is what I call by the set L. Okay, this is a list of integers. There could be a list of let us say strings. There could be a list of programs. There could be a list of let's say complex numbers. There could be a list of matrices, whatever. But here we are just looking at list of integers. Okay, so what is the domain?
Sir, L cross Z.
Will it be L cross R? L cross Z.
Z, integers. Is it? Okay, you could take L cross integers, but is the function going to be defined on -1? If the
positive.
Okay, so positive integers. Okay, so again, you can either leave those other points as undefined behavior, or maybe define them or restrict the domain. Okay, so you can say this is going to be, let's say Z plus. Okay, positive integers. This is the domain. Okay, and the range is going to be? So this is the domain of split. What is the range?
L cross L.
Sir, it shouldn't be Z plus. It should be like that second integer should be less than the size of the list plate.
Yeah, nice point. Okay, even if it was L cross Z plus, there are still some points which are undefined. For example, 3, 1, 2, 18. Okay, so this is not a valid input. Okay, so it's going to be a subset of L cross Z plus. Clear?
Sir, but while writing this set, we cannot separate them.
No, you can see there are different ways of specifying L cross, the set that we want, right? So D, so I'll do it once. D, the domain is going to be all x's belonging to L cross Z plus, such that this is something that you would have done in your class 8th, right? Now condition, what is the condition? So that x is equal to alpha beta. So alpha is going to be some list, beta is going to be some integer, and length of alpha. What's the condition? Can you complete it for me?
The length of alpha is greater than or equal to beta. At the same time, beta is greater than equal to.
Beta is greater than or equal to?
Beta is less than.
Yeah, so length of alpha should be greater than or equal to beta. That's all. And beta should be an integer, positive integer, right? Is that okay? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Or we could have done something different. We could have said that it is L cross Z plus, but on all the other points other than that is there in this D, we will say that it maps to, let us say, some undefined object. Okay, or behavior not defined. Okay. Any questions here? Rahul?
Sir, can we also say that the domain is a subset of L such that the last element of L is a positive integer less than the size of L?
Well, so then you are going to, let us, you're modifying the input now, right? This 3, you are considering it as part of the input list itself.
Yes.
Right? That is an alternate representation. Okay. So let us say now you could think of 3, 1, 2, 5, 7, 3. This is given as input. And what I want to do is take the last element of this list and use that to split. Right?
Yes, sir.
So that's a different description of the problem. Okay, and you have to say that now the lists that are allowed are ones in which the last element is basically smaller than n minus, the length minus 1 or something like that, right? Okay, yes, but then one could go one step further ahead and say that, look, I just convert all these things into binary, and then the input is just some binary string. Okay, and binary strings have a decimal, they have a numerical equivalent, and therefore the input is just an integer. One could use that, but here we are trying to pitch the algorithm at a certain abstraction level, right? Our objects, whatever is being taken as inputs, are you are getting 2 objects as input. One is a list, the other is a number. Okay, what you are suggesting is, can you encode this input in some other manner? Of course you can. Okay, there are multiple possible encodings of the same input. Okay, but here, whenever an algorithm is described, we don't usually go and modify the input description. The input description is given to us. Rahul, have I answered your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here the input is basically a list followed by a number. So it's a subset of L cross Z plus. Okay, and that subset we could describe it using the familiar methods for constructing sets. Okay, now let's do one more of this kind. If you want to find an element in a set, okay, you're given a sort. Let's assume that what is given to you is a sorted list. Okay, and you are given a number, and you need to check whether that number is present in the list. If it is present, you return its index. Otherwise, you return -1. Okay. For this function, what is the domain and what is the range? Yes, Duty. So find, okay. So let me give a sample point at which the function is evaluated. Find 1, 2, 5, 7. I'm assuming that the input is going to be sorted. The input list is going to be sorted. And let us say 4. The answer would be -1 because it's not present. If you give 5 as the second parameter, then the value will be 3. Okay, so this is a function. What is the domain? What is the range? Quickly, someone? Yeah, Hardik?
The domain is cross, as I believe.
I couldn't hear you, Hardik.
I believe the domain is again L cross Z plus.
No, it's not L cross Z star because L consisted of all lists, right? Not necessarily sorted.
I'm sorry, I didn't get you.
See, L consisted of all lists. The elements in L need not be sorted. Okay, but now it's a modified version of L in the sense we are considering only sorted lists.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, so there's small differences. Okay, what you will later on see is this is exactly what you call as types. Okay, so when you say L is L is a list, L is a sorted list, they are of different types. Okay, maybe many operations gets overloaded, their meaning remain. And for different types, you have similar meanings. Okay, but as types, they are different. Okay, in one case, what we have is an element of L cross Z plus. In the other case, what we have is L bar cross Z plus, where L bar is basically all the lists which are sorted. Okay. Okay, any questions so far? Yes, Hardik, your hand is raised. Hardik, you have a question? Okay. Okay, so this is about, so you think about any algorithm, you look at all the algorithms that you've learned so far and try to precisely capture what is the input domain and what is the output domain. Okay, in some sense, this is same as the input output specification. This is one of the starting points for the input output specification. In the input output specification, you also need to tell which element of the range does the particular element in the domain correspond to. That association also has to be made precise. Okay, now we will take a quick detour and learn about a special type of function called as inductively defined functions. Okay, so you have different types of functions, and there are different ways of defining functions. Okay, one way is by using what is known as the principle of mathematical induction. Okay, don't bother about it if you don't understand this fully at the moment. But this is what we are going to understand is the notion of inductively defined functions. Okay, I'm going to define a certain function. Okay, and you tell me if you understand what that function is. The name of the function is f. It's going to map in, let's say, natural numbers to natural numbers. Okay. So every natural number should, so this is the domain and this is the range. Okay, maybe a subset of natural numbers, doesn't matter. Okay. On all element in the domain, I need to tell what is the corresponding value of the function. Okay, so f of 1, I'm going to define it as this is equal to 1. Okay, and f of n plus 1 for any n is going to be equal to f of n plus 2 times n plus 1. Okay, is this a well-defined function? So all that I have told is I have in mind a function which maps natural numbers to natural numbers. Okay. Further, on the element 1, this will map to 1. On any other element n plus 1, I mean, if you take any n plus 1 will map to f of n plus f of plus 2n plus 1. Okay, is this well defined in the sense? Are all the elements of natural numbers do all the elements of natural number have a corresponding image? If so, what will that image be? If somebody is speaking, I can't hear you.
Sir, like we are basically squaring.
Yeah, this is the square function, right? Okay, but is just these two rules sufficient to describe the square function? Does this, I mean, can you think of any other function which satisfies these conditions?
No, sir, this function is just squaring. Like f of 1 is 1, f of 2 is 4, and so on.
How do you prove that the only function which satisfies this is the square?
Through mathematical induction.
Through mathematical induction. In some sense, mathematical induction is a way to define functions from natural numbers to natural numbers. You define it on one and you have defined it on every successor. Therefore, it is defined on the full collection. Okay. So this is an example of what is called as an inductively defined function. Okay. I will not formally define these notions. Okay, but instead give you a couple of more examples. Okay. So we are able to do this because a set of natural numbers is inductively defined. If I just change this n to reals, is this now a well-defined function?
If this is the definition, then I cannot actually get what is the value of function at suppose 1.5.
At 1.5, I can't tell what is the value of 1.5. Okay, is it well defined on, let's say, integers? I mean, positive and negative integers?
Yeah, positive and negative integers can be.
Okay, so I will just state without proof that this function that we defined is meaningful only because the set of natural numbers were an inductively defined set. Okay, what is the set of natural number? It consists of, so I'm going to inductively define the set of natural numbers. So 0 belongs to natural numbers, or maybe if you start at 1, 1 belongs to natural number. Okay, and for all n, n plus 1 belongs to natural numbers. Okay, now n, you should not think of it as an integer. If any element is there, its successor is also there in the set of natural numbers. That's the definition of, in some sense, the definition of natural numbers. Because the set was defined in this manner, these rules for defining the function on that set is exhaustive. Okay, we'll do one more example and then probably you'll understand this notion in a better manner. So let's say I look at the set T. Okay, T is the set of all binary trees with nodes labeled with, let us say, real numbers. Okay, each node has a label, which is it's a real number. Okay, that's the set of all binary trees. And of course, there is the empty binary tree also, which doesn't contain anything. Okay, so that's the set of all binary trees. Okay, now I'm going to define a function. Let's call it as G that will map T to, let's say, reals. Okay. So this is what I call as the empty tree. Okay, and G of empty tree. This I define it to be 0. Okay, and G of any other tree. Okay, so any other tree is basically going to have a node, which is the root, and then 2 subtrees, T1 and T2. And G of this particular element is going to be equal to X plus G of T1 plus G of T2. Okay, so this is some function. I mean, I'm saying that there is a function G which maps trees to real numbers, and this is the mapping. For the empty tree, it is 0. For any other tree, it is inductively defined in terms of its subtrees. Okay, this is well defined. Is it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, why is this well defined? It is because the set T is inductively defined. Can you give me an inductive definition of the set T? If you think about the set T, how do you describe the set T? In words, I said this is the set of all binary trees with nodes labeled with real numbers. Okay, by the way, what does this function G compute?
Sir, I can define T.
So if T1.
One second.
Sir,
What does
suppose
T
if
compute?
T1 and T2 belongs to T, then X with left child as T1 and right child as T2 also belongs to T, and the empty tree also belongs to T. That will
So
be
that is the inductive definition of the set of all trees, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is described using 2 rules, right? Empty tree is a tree. Any tree can be obtained by combining 2 smaller trees and a node X, right? So for these construction mechanisms, you have described the corresponding values, and therefore the function is well defined. Okay, what does the function really compute?
Sum of values of nodes.
Sum of values of nodes. Okay, you can also sum of the longest. I mean, suppose you wanted a function h from T to, let us say, natural numbers. Okay, and the function is basically the length of the or the height of the tree. How will you define it?
1 plus maximum of G of T1 comma G of T2.
1 plus G of maximum of 1 plus maximum of G of T1 comma G of T2. Okay, and G of the empty tree is 0. Okay, so that together produces a well-defined function, right? So this is how you define. I mean, if you have an inductive set, the domain was inductive, then any function from that set to another set can be described in terms of the inductive structure of the underlying domain. Okay. Now, can you define inductively the set of all lists? If you have a list, how do you describe? So list, when we said tuple or a list, okay, collection of elements which are ordered in some particular way.
So empty list is a list and a list formed by adding a number to another list, appending a number.
Appending at the start, that's going to form another list, right? Okay, so that's the definition of, that's a possible inductive definition of the set of lists. Okay, now when you think about the sort function basically takes a list and produces some other object, right? If you could just tell the inductive definition of sorting, I mean, what is the sorted version of an empty list? Itself, right? Okay, so in order to describe sorting, you can say it's a function from the collection of all lists to, let's say, sorted collection of lists which are sorted. Okay, LS I denote the list of the collection of lists which are sorted. Okay, so I want to describe a function which maps L to the sorted version. Okay, I need to tell what is the sorted version of empty set. What's this going to be?
Empty set itself.
Empty set itself. Okay, and what is the only other possible set? Only other possible list. So I let me just denote it by A colon L, or say A dot L. Okay, A comma L. So let me say that A comma L is the list that I obtain by concatenating the element A to the front of the list L. So sort of A comma L is what? If you could describe this, then we are done, right? The function is
L1 bar comma A comma L2 bar. Like L1 are all the elements of L which are less than A, and L2 are all the elements of L which are greater than A.
Okay, that's one way to say it.
Sir, this less than condition is not sufficient. So the sorted version of L where A is inserted at right place by splitting L
okay,
into.
so I can. Okay, so both are correct. So you could say that less than L. Okay, that also one could do. Okay, but let's, for the time being, do it in the way suggested by who spoke last?
Bhuvan.
Okay, suggested by Bhuvan in terms of insertion. So let me sort L. Okay, what will I get? I will get an element of LS, but that's not the correct thing, right? Okay, I need to write another function, basically insert A, right?
Yes, sir.
So insert is now a function which takes two parameters. Okay, you can again think about its domain. Its domain is going to be what? Its domain is going to be a cross product space. The first is going to be LS, and the second is going to be an element of the universe. Okay, I mean, if it was integers, then that's going to be an integers. And insert, I mean, maybe insert. I mean, how do we think about insert? We can describe this insert in terms of splitting the sorted list into two parts on the basis of A, right? So it's sorted, you can find at the correct position in L1, and then split it, then join them. Okay, so these are all just compositions of various functions. So the function insert is basically composed with the function. I mean, it's not really composition because it's a second argument as well, but some kind of composition, right? So the function insert is applied to two parameters. The first parameter itself is obtained by sorting L. Okay, not Li, just L. Okay, is this clear? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we can essentially we can think about computations. Sorting is a very classical computational operation. We can think about it as, let's say, applying functions to different, using function compositions to compute whatever we want. Okay. The sum of elements in a tree that could be computed using function compositions, right? This is basically, if you look at the function g, okay, there's an addition function. Okay, multiple additions are performed, and g is performed on the smaller instances and so on. Okay, so this way of computing using function compositions, that style is called as functional programming. Okay, any questions? Okay, so now let me describe what all things you have to do before next session. Okay, so the textbook for the functional programming part is Programming in Haskell. By Graham Hutton. Okay, so you need to get familiar with the language Haskell. So before next week, you are expected to read chapters 1 and 2. Okay, those are introductory material. Okay, most of the things will be straightforward, but you will be introduced to the syntax of Haskell. Okay, you need to install Haskell on your machines. Okay, so the chapters 1 and 2 you have to do and solve all the exercises in chapters 1 and 2. The programming exercises that are there, you need to program them. There are conceptual questions. Those things you have to write it down in a text file, and it should be made available to the TA while they are conducting the Viva. Clear? So this is about 20-25 pages of easy reading. Do that before next Wednesday. I will upload an assignment, so you need to make the corresponding entries in your Microsoft Teams account. Okay, any questions?
Sir, could you upload the PDF as well?
PDF of what?
The book.
The book is, are you asking me to be a part in pirating the book? Okay, you can, but anyway, you can just search for Graham Hutton on LibGen. Okay, if you get it, well and good. Okay, but I will ask you not to upload it onto the course pages. Okay, you can share it. I mean, if you get a pirated version of the book, it's up to you. I mean, you face the consequences, whatever are there. I mean, not from the course point of view, but piracy is in general illegal. Okay, there might if you're on campus, there might be copies of the book in the library. I'm not very sure. Okay, any other questions?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So which edition of the book should we use?
Second edition.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
So will you be uploading these notes as well?
I will try and I will do that. Okay. Any other questions?
Sir, are the programming assignments to be done in Linux machine only? Is there any such requirement?
Basically your program should compile on GHC. So
This would be throughout the course.
Implementation of Haskell and things work only in your own implementation, it will be difficult to evaluate it. Okay, so what we will use is the GHC version of Haskell. Okay, so the compiler that we use will be the GHC compiler. It has an, so you can easily install it on Linux, but the compiler, I don't think it will differentiate whether it is a Linux machine or a Windows machine. Okay, but whatever it is, it should run on GHC. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and the programs have to be uploaded. On your on Teams. Okay, so I will create an assignment. So the assignment basically consists of all the exercises, the exercise questions in chapter 1 and 2 of the textbook. Okay, and you have to so the programming part there you will have to do it yourselves. The non-programming part you have to write the answers in text format. Okay. And as it goes without saying, any copy cases will be directly referred to the academic section. They will take care of it. I will not deal with it. Okay, so your code is your code. No discussion about, you can discuss, but no writing or sharing codes. Okay, so if you have discussed with anybody, make that very clear in the submission as well. Any questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, we will end today's session. See you next Wednesday at 9 o'clock.
The classes will only be conducted on Wednesdays, right?
Huh?
Classes will only be conducted on Wednesdays, right?
I couldn't hear you. Could you repeat? Could you speak louder?
I'm asking that the classes are only being conducted on Wednesdays, right?
Yes, the classes will be conducted only on Wednesdays, like or whenever there is a Wednesday timetable.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else has any questions? Okay. Thank you all, and wish you a wonderful time this year as well as in the course.